Hello.
Hello.
So we're
So, yeah, recently we um
made a series of reacting to
yeah,
Mr.
we made a series of us reacting to Mr. Nightmare's Christmas horror stories, and now we're reacting to his winter ones, so like snowstorms and blizzards.
Yeah,
There's gonna be three.
we're not
There's a
a
lot less than the Christmas ones.
yeah we're not 100% on if this is going to be one of the parts or if this is just going to be its own video, but
Yeah,
we'll just
no, this probably just gonna be its own video.
okay.
And, yeah.
So yeah, we have three here that we're gonna do.
Yeah, first,
Is three true terrifying true stories that took place during snowstorms.
yeah.
Yeah, go on to Mr. Nightmare's channel and just look up winter.
My name is Ethan, and I'm a photographer.
I'll mute my mic.
I took a trip last year with my wife to the Colorado mountains for an art project. My wife is also an avid skier, so she talked me into adding skiing into the trip. We had the option to book a room at a ski resort or rent out a private log cabin. The second one seemed more romantic, so I picked that one. Plus, it didn't hurt that it was cheaper. The cabin was nothing luxurious or anything. It was a single floor, 4-room little thing. A 2-person bedroom, a small living room, a kitchen, and a bathroom. It may have been small, but the actual idea of being secluded in a warm log cabin during a blizzard was amazing. However, the storm was interfering with the cable signal, so we didn't have much to do this one particular evening. It was just starting to get dark out at this point, but there was still a decent amount of light outside, so I thought it would be perfect for getting a few shots and videos in the blizzard for backgrounds and wallpapers. I told my wife I'd be back within 10 minutes and slipped on my boots and coat. The moment I stepped outside and shut the door, I noticed footsteps leading up to the door in the snow that had blown under the wooden awning. I could see the prints doubled as whoever left them there turned and went the opposite direction. I was freaked the fuck out, but I wasn't about to go inside and scare my wife. I decided to give in to my curiosity and followed the prints to the right side of the cabin. Right away, I noticed that they led to the bedroom window. My heart froze in fear when I saw this. I could see my wife sitting on the bed using her iPad. She noticed me and I waved. She laughed. I continued to follow the footprints around the cabin to the other side. They led to the living room window on the other side. Someone was stalking us, but how long ago was the question? I found myself standing there for a good minute asking myself if I should follow the footprints anymore. For whatever reason, I decided I would. They were now leading away from the cabin. I knew I was following the prints to where this person was going, not coming from, simply by the boot marks. I followed the prints away from the opening and into the trees. That was where I saw him. A man wearing a black coat facing a tree, slouched down looking at the ground. He was still as a statue, and I could see the snow piling up on his hood and shoulders. I froze in my tracks, trying not to make a sound. I would have thought to ask him if he needed help otherwise, but this guy was just standing there not doing anything, like some kind of deranged freak. I started to gradually move backwards without even turning around, making sure this man didn't turn around or notice me. When I got at a visual distance, I turned around and stomped through the snow back to the cabin. When I slammed the door shut, my wife came over to see what was wrong. I saw worry in her eyes. I guess she saw the worry in mine. She knew I saw something, and after a few minutes of harassment, I finally told her what I saw. She immediately started packing her things, telling me we're leaving right away. I told her no, we're not going anywhere. I would not get a refund for leaving early, and I wasn't about to up and leave just because some weird guy was walking around outside. She made a point of locking both locks on the door and making sure all of the windows were sealed shut. For the rest of the night, we read stuff on our iPads. I reviewed the pictures and videos I had taken so far. We turned out the lights early as there wasn't much else to do. What if he's still out there? I remember my wife asking me. There's no way he's still out there, I then assured her. Listening to the wind blowing outside, along with the small flakes of snow hitting the windows, was strangely relaxing, and I knew I'd be able to fall asleep quickly. Except if it wasn't for the knock at the bedroom window. We were both still awake, and we both knew it was a knock from a person. I ushered my wife out of bed and out into the living room without turning on any lights. There was nothing to use as a weapon whatsoever. Our only option was to run before something might happen. I told my wife we'd have to forget our luggage and make a dash for the Jeep. We slipped on our boots and coats in the dark in a matter of seconds, and when we heard a knock at the living room window from the opposite side of our car, we took that opportunity to run. I pressed the unlock button, so grateful I chose to have remote locks on my Wrangler, and we hopped in. The car started with ease, and as soon as the headlights flashed on, the man was standing facing the log cabin on our side now. Not a window, just facing the wall of the cabin in the same position I had seen him in earlier, as if he were hiding his face. We drove to the nearby ski resort without much trouble in the Jeep. We stayed there for the night and went back the next day to the log cabin to collect our things we left behind. He wasn't there. When I was 17 years old and I was home alone, coincidentally on the night that I tried pot for the first time, I experienced the most horrifying moment of my life. It was mid-December, during a late fall snowstorm. I was in my room with some movie on in the background, Mrs. Doubtfire if I recall correctly, though I wasn't paying attention to it. I was trying to figure out how to properly inhale without coughing. I think I spent about half an hour breathing in smoke from that pipe, yet I couldn't even tell if I felt any different. For maybe another 10 minutes I still continued at it, and finally, I felt a little different. It was a new feeling, hard to explain at the time. I felt as if the room around me felt more calming, and I was more attentive to my surroundings, or maybe less attentive, I couldn't really tell. All I know is I felt different. I was excited, I wanted to keep going. Then suddenly I felt as if I heard a sound come from downstairs. I muted my TV and listened. It sounded like there was a tapping noise coming from the front door, like a light knocking. I got nervous that it was my parents or sister, as I didn't know if I'd be noticeably acting differently or if they would be able to pick up on the smell from around the house. I headed downstairs and looked through the peephole, not to find my parents or sister, but a severely underdressed, almost homeless-looking man. To put this into perspective, we don't live in the kind of suburbs that a lot of you most likely live in. We don't exactly live in a completely desolate area either. We have neighbors, but houses are about 200 yards apart from each other, which doesn't sound like much, but it's a decent distance. So on a dark, stormy night like this where we live, with some random dirty-looking man who I'd never seen before standing on my porch, I naturally pretended I wasn't home. I stood there and kept watching through the peephole as the guy stayed put, proceeding to knock on the door again, this time louder. I knew I wasn't going to answer, so I walked back upstairs to my room and shut the door. In a sense, I felt bad, but I would never let a stranger into my house, and I couldn't imagine what else he could have wanted other than to be let in. Time passed as I continued hitting the pipe, getting more adjusted to it and starting to really feel its effects. I felt like my mind was wandering, forgetting I was even laying in my bed, or even in my bedroom for that matter, when there was a loud thud at my window. I jumped up quicker than a mousetrap when I heard it. It sounded like a rock had hit my window. I shut off the TV now, the only source of light in the bedroom. Now it was pitch black. It took me a while to connect this with the man who was at the stoop. He was out there, I was in here. There's nothing he could do to me, I somehow assured myself. However, being high only made me more paranoid and afraid of every little noise. In fact, I seemed to be more alert to every sound, even the small little house noises like random cracks in the walls. Nothing happened after a few minutes, and being in the pitch black darkness kind of tired me out. That, and apparently I just learned that pot puts you to sleep more effectively than sleeping pills. I awoke sometime later, thinking it must have been like 3 in the morning, but I looked at the clock, and it said it was only 1:15. I had only been asleep for like 20 minutes. I sat up thinking I heard something from down in the den. I rubbed my eyes, and then remembered the man. My heart started racing again. I was about to get up when I realized something. Across the room, there was something beyond my half-open door. I leaned in and squinted my eyes. There was somebody peering into the room at me from behind the door. I let out the most horrified and gut-wrenching scream possible as the person then emerged from the door and started walking over to my bed in the dark. I just need a warm place to stay. I had no choice but to shove him to the floor when he made it to my bed. It was then that I realized he was a very skinny and weak man. I was able to drag him up and push him to the front door with force. He tried to fight and resist, but he was too weak to do anything. He was crazy. I could see it in his eyes. I shoved him outside and locked the door, and then called the cops. I stayed downstairs where he had broken the glass to get inside, just to make sure he couldn't get back in. When the cops arrived, they found him sitting in my front bushes curled up in a ball. They took him to the station, and he was no longer my problem. So do I feel bad about this today? I guess I do a little. He was undoubtedly crazy, but I don't know how dangerous he was. It was still either way the scariest experience of my life. When I was younger, me and my friends would always have big manhunt games in the snow. This one January night when we were 13 and there was this crazy blizzard going on, we continued our tradition. We had a group of 6 people playing, 3 on each team. The game was more or less tag, but it involved hiding and running to an assigned safe point, which for us was the front stoop. It was fun in the summer, but the snow only made it so much better, what with the snow adding as a hiding and slowing down factor, hunting down footprints, and even using snowballs as weapons to slow down chasers. It was the most fun game of our childhoods. Until this particular year, things turned pretty bad. It was our turn to hide. I'll give you the names of my teammates to make things more easy to follow. Dan and Christian. Dan hopped the fence to someone's backyard on the other side of the block, which wasn't really cheating as we had no limits with this game. Christian jumped on top of my other friend's shed in the backyard and hid behind the sloped roof. I thought I'd be sneaky and started running all around the backyard to create a seemingly endless trail of footprints. When our friends from the other side of the house announced that they were coming, I had to think quickly. I did something that wasn't too pleasant. First, I signaled for Christian atop the roof to run if I were to run myself, and then I hopped in the bushes and lay flat in the snow. 2 of the others entered the backyard and started analyzing the crazy footprint path I created. I knew it would lead to me though, so I had to be ready to run if they got close. They were getting closer to the bushes I was hiding in, so Christian jumped down from the shed into the snow and darted for the front lawn. The 2 chased after him in both directions. I knew the stoop would be guarded right now, so I took this opportunity to better hide myself. I decided to follow Dan's approach and hopped onto the roof of the shed, then over the fence to that backyard on the other side of the block. I didn't see Dan anywhere though. I looked for his footprints, but quickly found some other kind of tracks in the snow. By the fence were a few boot marks from where Dan must have landed, but then quickly the marks turned to a steady trail of something being pushed or dragged through the snow. I followed the trail to the back door of the pitch-black house, and then it stopped. I quickly put 2 and 2 together, and my heart sank. I turned and headed back for the fence to hop over and call for my friend's parents, but about halfway across the yard, I heard the sliding door to the house open, and someone wearing a black coat with a hood covering their face emerged and started stomping over to me. I screamed like a girl as I pulled myself up over the fence, just barely making it before he could grab my legs. All my friends came running into the backyard. Then shortly after, my friend's parents came out the back door. I told them what happened, and the mom phoned the police while the dad stormed to the other side of the block with a gun and knocked on the door. There was no answer, so he let himself in as we watched. The door was unlocked. He had us wait outside, and within a few minutes, came out with Dan in his arms. He was knocked out. His face looked red and wounded, as if he were hit in the face by a shovel or something. There was no car in the driveway, indicating the guy left when I escaped his yard. He never returned to his house, and I'm pretty sure he's still wanted by police to this day. It just goes to show, anybody out there, even your next door neighbor, may be a predator, just waiting for an opportunity to strike.
Yeah, next one.
Next one. Wait, no, those are the Christmas ones.
Are we also watching the ones by Let's Read or just Mr. Nightmare?
Just Mr. Nightmare. Oh, we just did that.
Oh wait, no, not that. So now we're doing the Blizzard horror stories.
Yep.
My friend Carlos and I would always go out shoveling people's sidewalks after big snowstorms to make some quick cash. In like 2013 or 2014, our town was in the midst of a blizzard. It was dark, windy, and snow was building up fast. Our school already announced it would be closed due to snow the next day. So with nothing to do that night, and it being only like 8 p.m., we went out with our shovels and started ringing doorbells, offering to shovel sidewalks for cash. We got a lot of no's before we got our first yes. We made around $15 each on our first house. We made our way across the neighborhood. A lot of people weren't interested, and most people just wouldn't open their doors. We got a second house eventually, and made a little more money on that one. Then I remember a long gap between that house and the next house that would say yes. It was a small corner house, but usually corner houses would pay more. We rang the bell, and the door cracked open, but whoever was on the other side didn't show their face. They did, however, speak from the other side. A deep man's voice said, "Who's there?" I pitched our snow shoveling service to the man on the other side, requesting $40 in return since it was a corner house. There was a short silence. Then the voice on the other side said, "Oh yes, please, $40 is fine." There was a hint of nervousness in the voice. I said all right, and then the door shut. I didn't see the man's face at all. I turned to Carlos and said that was weird, but we started the shoveling. I started from the front porch down the walkway to the driveway. Carlos worked on the sidewalks. I couldn't help but stare at the house every once in a while, and at one point when I turned to a window as I was throwing the snow from my shovel onto the ground, I saw who I assumed to be the homeowner. He was standing at one of the windows watching me. Could I see anything of his face? Not really. He was standing in a dark room. A little uncomfortable it made me, but I tried my best to ignore it and continue shoveling. Of course, I'd occasionally glance back and he would still be there. Eventually I finished the driveway, just around the same time Carlos finished the sidewalks. So we started our way back up the walkway to the front stoop. But before getting to the stoop, the door opened and the man inside shouted, "Go around back." Carlos and I froze, looked at each other, then obeyed his command. We stepped through the snow-covered grass to the backyard gate. I opened it and pushed it through the rising snow, which was slightly difficult. Then, there we were, in the man's backyard, which had a small awning that we stayed under to get out from the falling snow. We waited by the back door, expecting him to come outside eventually with our money. We waited for over a minute and started getting antsy. I started pounding on the back door since there didn't seem to be a doorbell. Then there was the sound of a window being rotated open, followed by the man's voice again, saying, "Come inside." Carlos and I looked at each other again, and then I led the way in through the back door. All the lights in this house were turned off. It was actually so hard to see anything, really. "Hello?" I said. I heard a man's voice from another room call, "I'm counting your money on the table." It seemed he was inside the kitchen, which was connected by a small door through the room we entered from. We walked closer to the kitchen, which appeared to be lit up through the window only by the streetlights standing on the side of the house. I stood at the doorway, intending on looking through the crack of the door to see where the guy was standing in the kitchen, but I couldn't see through the crack because it was blocked by him. The man was standing on the other side of the door, looking through the crack. I turned and pretended I didn't see him. I made up some bull, like telling Carlos we forgot something outside. We left the house, and the man didn't say a word. As soon as we got outside, we grabbed our shovels and sprinted away from there. All of our hard work shoveling that house was for nothing. We got back to my backyard, put the shovels away, and went inside to warm up and rest for a little bit. Carlos and I chilled for a little bit, then it was time for him to go. He went out the back to get his shovel, but he came back inside, concerned, telling me to come take a look at something. There was an extra, fresh set of boot marks in the snow. You may ask how we knew. That's because one set trailed from the gate to the back door to the shed in the corner of our backyard. Carlos hurried back inside, and we told my mom. We live in a very poor, relatively unsafe neighborhood, so my mom was quick to believe us and get 911 on the phone. Police showed up relatively quickly considering the horrible driving conditions, and they went to investigate the shed. Carlos, my mom, and I watched through the back window as the police pulled out a man from the shed. He had a matching shirt from what I could see through the window back when we were shoveling that property. It was undoubtedly the house owner. He later admitted to police that he was going to attempt to break into the house when we all went to sleep. Why, however, he never answered. Police also said he was very intoxicated when he admitted this, which made me think, what on earth was he going to do to us in that kitchen if we didn't leave his house? It was an early December night, and we were having our first snowstorm of the year. I was in my bed watching some low-budget Christmas film while texting various friends, mostly my friends George and Pat. We used to text in a 3-person group chat. Everything was as it should be when I felt my heart drop to my stomach as a bang came from the window right next to my bed. I opened the curtain, but there was no one standing out there. Then, pow, there was another, as I was still looking out the window. It was a snowball. Someone was throwing snowballs at my window. I stood on my bed to get the best possible view out the window, but I didn't see anyone standing out there in the snow. So I actually lifted open my window to call out. It was almost immediately after I shouted out the window that I heard someone's laughter. Not a child's laughter like I was expecting it to be. It was a deeper voice, could belong to anyone from the age of 17 to 40 for all I knew. I shut the window and started texting in our little group chat saying I knew it was one of them messing with me. The fact that they now weren't responding made me even more confident. I didn't close the curtain as I knew whichever one of them it was, they weren't done messing with me. And just like that, another snowball hit my window. I lifted the window up quickly to try and catch them, and there he was standing in the snow, waving to me. But it wasn't either of my friends. It was some guy in a black beanie and black coat with gloves on, laughing. He started approaching the window. I hurried and slammed it shut and twisted the little lock. I also closed the curtain so that he couldn't look into my room. Both of my friends had texted back by now with question mark responses. Then there was a single knock at my window, and it started being fiddled with and shaken. He was trying to lift it open. When it all stopped, I waited a couple minutes before peeking through the curtain. It seemed the coast was clear, so I finally went to go tell my mom and dad about the whole thing, who came to have a look out my window. Sure, my dad believed me, he literally saw the footprints in the snow, but he just didn't see it necessary to call the police, figuring whoever was out there gave up.
My dad turned on all the outside lights just as a deterrent, and then they went to sleep. I stayed up in my room with the lights off, continuing to watch movies. My door clicked open. I said get out, assuming it was my little brother. The door shut, so it seemed he listened to me. Silence, except for the TV. I watched for a long while, then a click in my wood floor. I turned, halfway through repeating get out in a louder voice, when realizing it was not my short little brother. It was that tall man in the black beanie and coat from outside. He started waving to me again at the doorway, then put his pointer finger up to his lips. He started walking over to my bed, and that's when I got up, ready to defend myself. He approached faster now, easily grabbed me, and covered my mouth with his leather gloves. There was a wet white towel in his glove that he was pressing to my face for a long time. I tried to break free and scream, but I couldn't, and that was the last thing I remember before everything went black. I woke up in my living room with my parents and police hovering over me. An ambulance arrived shortly. My dad heard the commotion going on in my room and came to find the man over me. My dad, much larger than that man, managed to overpower him, but not long enough before the police could arrive. He ran out the front door and disappeared. I was quickly brought to the hospital. Thankfully, I was all right. If you're wondering, the man climbed in through our downstairs window. It's a little-known common courtesy out in the mountains during a snowstorm that if someone's seeking shelter in your cabin, you let them in. No, I wasn't the one offering that courtesy to someone else in the story. I was the one seeking refuge. It was supposed to be a long weekend of hunting, but what started as a cold, sunny day quickly formed tons of dark storm clouds, and I quickly found myself right in the middle of a blizzard. After a full, rather unsuccessful day of hunting hares, I was way too far and disoriented to make my way back to my cabin. I had to seek refuge somewhere else. I came across a log cabin nestled between a circle of trees. No lights on, but I still had to try the door. I hit the door with my fist a few times. No answer, but I could hear footsteps on the other side, approaching the door. I expected it to open, but it didn't. I shouted that I'm lost and need shelter. The door cracked open, and I heard a voice say, "Come in, leave your boots by the door." I waited a bit, expecting him to open the door fully and formally greet me as anyone would, but that didn't happen, so I pushed the door open myself and entered the dark cabin. The room was lit by 2 candles, just enough for me to see the couch that the man then told me to sleep on. As for the man, all I saw was his silhouette on the far side of the room. The little light from the candles didn't extend that far. I dropped my bag and gun on the floor and laid down on the couch. I thanked the man for letting me crash here till the storm blows over. He didn't answer. His behavior wasn't the most bizarre thing. Folks are strange up in the mountains. If he wasn't up for conversation, I'd just get some early shut-eye. I closed my eyes, though the level of darkness with my eyes closed wasn't much of a difference. I was subconsciously waiting to hear the man's footsteps leave the room, but they never did. I opened my eyes, and his silhouette was still in the corner of the room, just standing there. I felt the need to say, "Yeah, I think I'm just going to get some sleep now, thanks." No response. I turned to my other side so that I wouldn't be tempted to just keep opening my eyes to check on him. Some time passed, but without having heard his footsteps walk away, the curiosity was eating away at me. I turned over to look again, and this time, I swear to God, the silhouette of the man was closer by at least a few feet. I couldn't make out his face, but the slight glow from the candles would just barely trickle around the man's forehead, and what I saw was disgustingly pale skin. I quickly gathered my belongings and thanked him, but I said I had to go. I didn't look at him anymore, because I don't think I wanted to know what he looked like. I put my boots on outside and hurried back into the blizzard. I came across another cabin down the hill, this one with the lights on. I knocked on the door, and some old man and his wife answered the door. They welcomed me in immediately and were very inviting. They gave me some hot tea and offered me a spot on the couch. I told them my story about the freaky cabin up the hill, and the two looked at each other, puzzled. The woman confirmed 2 times the cabin I was talking about. Then she said, "Honey, the owner of that cabin was murdered 2 years ago. That cabin has been vacant ever since."
Because we've been doing this for a while, so should we take a break?
Part 2. No.
Yep. Hello, we are back. We had to pause the recording for a bit, but, yep. Okay, so the next one is 3 Chilling True Blizzard Horror Stories, Volume 2. So, yeah.
Wait, or not that.
No, it's not that. Yeah, it's, that.
It was almost a decade ago. I was in the Adirondack Mountains for a hiking and skiing trip. I rented an Airbnb cabin for the week, kind of nestled in its own private section of woods, perfect for skiers and hikers. Though there was news of an incoming blizzard all of a sudden one day that week. I wasn't just going to cut my trip 3 days short though, and I already paid for it. I think it was a Friday, I don't remember, but I woke up that morning to knocks at the front door of my cabin. I looked out the window in my bedroom, and I was greeted with nothing but white sheets of snow covering everything, with heavy snow still piling on. I looked to the front door, and there was this woman in a parka who looked rather distressed. I quickly threw on a change of clothes and opened the door. She was some 40-something-year-old woman. Her cheeks were red, and she looked freezing. She asked, in I guess as polite way as possible, if she could seek shelter here until the storm blew over. I figured it was the gentleman thing to do. So I invited her in and told her to make herself comfortable while I heated up some coffee. She plopped herself down on the couch and asked if I lived here. I told her it was just an Airbnb, then asked where she was coming from. She said she also rented an Airbnb up here, but she got caught in the blizzard and couldn't find her way back. She said her name was Meredith. I handed her a cup of coffee, but she refused it and said she was really tired. Then she asked if she could just rest on the couch. I allowed it, though as I ate my breakfast. I can't lie, I felt really awkward. I didn't really know what to do after my breakfast. I didn't feel comfortable just hanging in the living room kitchen area, so I went back to my room to watch TV. The snow was really coming down outside, and the wind was so aggressive that the whistling streaked through the windows. Not too long after, another knock at the door. I once again looked out the window. This time there was a man outside. I went to open the door, with Meredith now sitting up on the couch, asking who it was. I told her I don't know, then I opened the door. It was like deja vu because the man basically gave the same story, that he was caught in the blizzard and needed a place to stay. At this point, having already let Meredith in, I had to let him in too. I told him the same thing I told her, make yourself comfortable. He introduced himself as Mark. Meredith and Mark. They introduced themselves to each other as well, and they had a laugh at the fact that they were both in the same boat. Then they both kind of playfully praised me for letting them in. Meredith seemed more lively now, more open to conversation. So we talked about a bunch of random stuff until there was nothing really left to talk about. The day dragged on into the night. It grew dark and cold inside the cabin. The snow was showing no signs of receding. I offered them whatever food was in the fridge throughout the day. Unfortunately for me, It seemed it was approaching that time that I had to designate where they would be sleeping. But Meredith kind of did that for me. She asked if I would allow the two of them to stay here for the night. I had to say yes. So they both slept on the couches. I slept in my room, of course. I fell asleep rather easily, with the knowledge that my belongings were under my bed and couldn't be easily stolen by these two strangers. I'm usually a heavy sleeper, but this night I woke up to a loud thump. I sat up. The door to my bedroom was open, and the sound of the outside wind was incredibly loud. I discovered the front door to the cabin was open too, and neither Meredith nor Mark were on the couch. There were fresh-looking footsteps leading into the snow, and I could see Meredith just standing out there in the snow, facing me, holding what looked to be my travel bag. I yelled at her to come back here, along with a few choice words. I ran to my room to get my boots. As I rushed to put the boots on while on the couch, I noticed my bedroom door was now shut. I 100% did not close that door. Was I about to open it? Hell no. Especially not after I heard footsteps on the other side of the door. I got my boots and coat on and ran to the front porch again. But now Meredith wasn't alone. Someone, a man, I couldn't tell if it was Mark or not, was standing next to her, holding her hand, and they were both facing the house. I didn't care about the bag anymore. I ran to my Jeep and drove through the 3 feet of snow. There had to be more than just those two people in the house that night, because someone else was in the bedroom. I was too nice. I let my guard down with two strangers, and I paid the price. I'm just happy they didn't kill me, though. Somehow I got the vibe they were trying to do more than just rob me of my bag. My older brother and I used to love to play out in the snow. We live by the woods. I'm not giving my town or state or any other details of our location, though. One night, our parents let us go outside to play in the blizzard. We figured playing hide and seek would be fun since the footprints in the snow would create a new factor in the game. So I was the one hiding first. We were playing in the woods with flashlights. I turned mine off once I found a place to hide, just to not give away my location. I ducked down in the deep snow between two big trees. I tried covering my tracks in the snow, but I couldn't possibly get all of them. I saw my brother's flashlight in the distance, coming in my direction. He was definitely going to find me, so I ran in the dark deeper into the woods. I definitely lost him because I didn't see his light anymore, or maybe he turned it off. Also, we knew these woods, and I knew which direction I was going. I wasn't going to get lost. Eventually, as I kept walking though, I found another trail of footprints. They seemed like they were left there only a few minutes ago, so I started following them, expecting to find a deer at the end. As the footprints became more fresh, however, I started to realize they were boot prints, not animal footprints. This also meant I was getting closer to whoever just left these boot prints. I was thinking at first that it was my brother. Maybe he ran past me without me hearing it. I only thought that because I didn't see how or why anyone else would be out here in the middle of a blizzard. With my light still on, I noticed something black sticking out of this big pile of snow, which seemed to sit right next to the boot marks. I stopped and examined it, and brushed some of the snow off the object. I brushed enough snow off to realize it was a big black garbage bag. This didn't look good. I already smelled something foul in there. Garbage? That's what I was hoping for. I tried to find the opening of the bag, and eventually just gave up and tore the bag open with my nails. I gagged the instant I saw what was inside. A decomposing human body. When I say gagged, I'm talking coughing loudly and uncontrollably in shock and disgust, and I think that gave away my position to my brother, because pretty soon his light started shining on me. I turned to him, his light in my face, and made a hand motion signaling for him to run, like go home. Rightfully so, he was confused and kept approaching me, so I ran to him and told him to turn off his flashlight. I pointed at the bag and whispered what was inside. He didn't believe me, even after I begged him to just go home with me. He went to the bag to see for himself, and when he saw I wasn't lying, he put his hand over his mouth. As the older brother, he started guiding me and nudging me back to the house, trying not to make a sound. Though, as we moved, we kept looking back, thinking we heard footsteps in the snow behind us. We moved faster every time. He had to keep the flashlight on, otherwise it would be pitch black. Then, I think at the same time, we both looked back after hearing a footstep again, and saw about 50 feet away or so, there was someone standing there, right in the light of my brother's flashlight, watching. From there, we ran all the way back home. The man yelled something at us, but neither of us could make out what he said. We got back to the house 2 minutes later and told our parents, who called the police to report the dead body. The police came and asked us a bunch of questions, and they sent out a search team based on our description of the location. They didn't make us go back out there. The search turned up no results, but they resumed the next day in the daylight, which was when we were asked for assistance in retracing our steps. We did the best we could, but the body was never found. It wouldn't be much of a surprise if whoever was out there moved the body after realizing there were 2 witnesses. We were literally just little kids when this happened, and we were still being followed by possibly the person who hid that body there to begin with. I still wonder if we just narrowly escaped with our lives. It started on the night of the first snowstorm of the year.
What? Just edit that out.
I was off the next day for work, so I was just relaxing in my bed watching a movie, drinking hot cocoa. All of a sudden, something hit my window that nearly gave me a heart attack. I looked at my window and saw the fresh mark of a snowball having just splattered over the glass. I opened the window to look outside, and I heard a kid's laughter. Well, that answered that. I closed the window again, and my attention shifted back to the movie. Not too long before a second pow at the window, followed by the kid's laughter. This time I ignored it. I knew that by giving the kid a reaction, they would keep going. Apparently that worked, because no more snowballs were thrown at my window that night. The next night, though, it happened again, this time while I was asleep. I woke up to a much louder and more ferocious bang at the window from a snowball. I opened the window and took a look outside. Though it wasn't snowing anymore, I still couldn't see too far out onto the lawn, though I did hear the laughing of the kid again. It was a boy's laughter. It sounded like a 10-year-old. I yelled something out the window at him. I think it was a threat, but nothing too serious to be directed at a child. It didn't happen again that night. The next day, a lot of the snow had melted, but most of the ground was still covered in a white sheet. After turning off my light in my room, I lay awake, anticipating and dreading the sound of a snowball hitting the glass that would once again make me jump out of my skin. And just like clockwork, it happened. That goddamn kid was back. I was ready this time. I jumped out of bed and looked out the window. This time, I saw just for maybe half a second the back of a kid running away into the darkness. I threw on my shoes and coat and ran outside to find him. I found where his footsteps started at my window, and I followed them. I ran as fast as I could, trying to catch up to him. His footprints led me down a grass field until I reached a road. The footprints stopped at a big sycamore tree. Wrapped around it were 2 white bands of flowers. There was also a wooden cross planted in front of the tree. It was a memorial for a fatal car crash here. I double and then triple checked to see if the footsteps went any other direction, but they mysteriously stopped right there. I walked back home and went to bed, a bit disturbed. The next day I did some research and inquired with some locals, and I found out a mother and her son died in a car crash running into that tree. When I learned this, I got goosebumps, but I didn't want to find out how old the son was. I couldn't bring myself to do it. God forbid the son was around 10 years old. I'd forever be haunted by this, even more so than I already am. The next night, I thought I heard a child's laughter outside my window, but it may have just been my imagination running wild. I had to take sleeping pills for a whole month, just so that I wouldn't be awake terrified all night.
That last one was a bit short, but is that it for this? I think that's it. But
Okay, that is the end of the video. Also, go check out the Christmas reaction videos that we recently.
yeah, I will we'll leave a link for the playlist of the reaction videos to the Christmas
Yeah,
ones
we'll
in the
put the link in the
description.
description.
Yeah, we'll link that in the description. Definitely go check those out. But yeah, that.
Yeah, like and subscribe.
Okay, like and subscribe. Goodbye. See you in the next video, which we're not sure what's gonna be yet. But yeah, goodbye. Like and sub.